All countries have an official version of their history. Ours is about a nation that won 2 world wars, a navy that ruled the waves, and a global empire in which millions of foreigners were grateful to be British subjects. But there is another side to the story.
Our heroes often have an ignored side, a toxic past, where they were involved in the deaths and suffering of millions.
Across the world, people are looking again at their national heroes. And protesters are demanding their statues be torn down.
Well, I think it's high time that we start to really think about the complicated and quite negative history of a lot of British heroes.
Churchill was a racist!
Now the argument has come to Britain.
We are at a crossroads, and we're deciding which parts of our history we want to celebrate and which parts we want to question.
So I'm going to explore whether there is a dark side to our greatest national icons.
God bless you all.
I hate Indians.
God.
They are a beastly people with a beastly religion.
I'll confront those proud of our past.
I don't think apologising for it does any good to anybody. It's too late for that.
And even my Twitter trolls.
If it comes to having the statue removed or you being locked up, I think I'll go with you being locked up.
I'm going to be questioning everyone and everything to find out whether we should bring Britain's heroes tumbling down.
I've got a confession to make. I got more than I bargained for when I wrote an article headlined, "Toppling Statues, Here's Why Nelson's Column Should Be Next." I took on Nelson, a national legend with pro-slavery views, to try and start a debate about why we ignore difficult issues in history, like colonialism, racism, and slavery. I touched a nerve. I want to investigate why people get so angry when I raise what to me are simple facts, and see if I can find a way forward. Let's start with Nelson. The history we publicly acknowledge is that Admiral Horatio Nelson gave up his life to win the Battle of Trafalgar. In doing so, he turned the tide of war against Napoleon and saved Britain from French invasion. We celebrate his heroic actions across the country, and his ship, the HMS Victory, has become a place of pilgrimage. I've come here to meet one of the most senior naval figures in Britain, Admiral Sir Jonathan Band.
This is the ship he served in as the Commander-in-Chief, and the ship in which he fought and won the famous battle, and of course lost his life. And where we are sitting here is the great cabin, and this is really his sitting room, dining room, and his bedroom or bunk is through there.
So these
this
are all
is very
his
much,
private living quarters.
This is private living quarters, but being a warship, you'll notice there's various hatches and things. This was turned into part of the gun deck, and so these shutters went up, cannons were run into these. All these are on hinges, so that you get complete clear right down the gun deck. So it was a dining room and it was a sitting room, but it was also a place of battle. It is just one of those places that most Brits bring their children at some stage.
Why does Nelson matter so much to you and to the people who come and visit his ship?
I mean, he's one of our great heroes. Why? Because he, along with a navy of the time, he basically suppressed all the enemies that we had. And as a result of the Battle of Trafalgar, basically Britain then had control of the high seas, really for the next 100 years, which allowed all the trade to go on, which brought us our wealth. And the whole Victorian era really was about the foundation that Nelson left this country. And that's why he is rightfully a hero. He saved us from invasion, and he set the conditions of peace under British terms for 100 years. Pretty remarkable.
When you do start to question the version of history that we're used to hearing, people get really, really angry. And I know this because that's exactly what I've done. And social media is the place where this thrives. When I've put out questions that challenge our received wisdom about the past, the response I get is literally a torrent of abusive and sometimes even quite threatening messages. I am English, you are not. Don't mess with my family history, which contributed to the country you have today. It's really this idea that people like me, who are perceived as coming from somewhere else, have made no contribution.
And there's a lot more where that came from.
This woman gleefully injects poison into the nation's bloodstream and should be prosecuted for stirring up racial hatred. Wow. This is quite good insight, actually, into what I think is really the underlying feeling here, this sense of a culture at threat.
While we rush to protect Nelson's legacy, when it comes to the most divisive moral issue of his age, I believe Nelson was on the wrong side of history. I've come to St. Paul's Cathedral. It's the most sacred spot in the Nelson story, where after a lavish 5-day state funeral, he was laid to rest. I'm here at his tomb to meet the authority on Nelson, Professor Andrew Lambert.
So when it comes to Nelson's flaws, I feel that there's part of his history that is often left off the table. The transatlantic slave trade, which, was an intrinsic part of Britain's economic prosperity at the time. Is there anything that you can show me that can help us understand exactly where Nelson stood on that?
Nelson is, as a sea officer, is involved because everybody who is in the Royal Navy is involved in protecting British commerce. And some of that commerce is the transatlantic slave trade. So what I brought with me are 3 pieces of correspondence where Nelson refers to the slave trade and slavery in the West Indies.
Nelson's letters are revealing.
And it's Negroes and cattle.
Not only did he lead the Navy in the West Indies, where the economy was built on slavery and the slave trade, he befriended the slave owners and admired their wealth. He then married into a slave-owning family and held his wedding on a slave plantation. Later, when the campaign to abolish slavery began to tear Britain apart, the slave owners wrote to Nelson asking him to use his status to stand against the abolition movement and its parliamentary figurehead, William Wilberforce.
What is interesting about Nelson's reply to this is that he does refer to Wilberforce by name. And he says, "And neither in the field nor in the Senate shall their interest be infringed while I have an arm to fight in their defense, or a tongue to launch my voice against the damnable and cursed doctrine of Wilberforce and his hypocritical allies." So Nelson is quite happy to support the slave trade because, as he sees it, it's part of the British economy, and it's his job as the servant of the state to defend that.
Nelson was in the place where this was happening. He was friends with the people doing it. He was married to the daughter of one of the people doing it. He really should have known better.
No, he knows what's going on, but he doesn't see any occasion for a servant of the state to change state policy. It is not a critical defect of Horatio Nelson that he wasn't an advocate for the abolition of the slave trade. It tells us a great deal about the 18th century.
If he'd have had some basic compassion for the actual Africans living this, it might have seemed a bit more of an urgent a problem.
He's not going to be spending his days pushing for the abolition of slavery or the slave trade because actually he's rather busy. And if he makes a mess of his day job, the French will occupy London.
Andrew is a great authority on Nelson, but I think he's only telling half the story. For much of his career, Nelson's day job was not to defend Britain, but its commercial interests. In the West Indies, that meant defending the ships of the Atlantic slave trade and islands on which hundreds of thousands lived in chains. I think we're in denial about this, unable to confront uncomfortable truths. Instead, we get angry. Nelson was a brave man. It's not statues you hate, it's British culture. We much rather remove Afua than our beloved real Brit, Lord Nelson. You act and speak like an ungrateful immigrant.
I've been contacting all of my Twitter trolls to see if any of them will actually meet with me in person. And surprise, surprise, almost all of them have refused, except this one. His Twitter handle is PJStar27, and this is what he has to say about me. He is a war hero, that's Nelson he's talking about, and you are a joke. What next? Destroy HMS Victory? This woman is a disgrace and a traitor and should be locked up. So I'm about to meet Paul, and it is actually the first time I've ever met one of my Twitter trolls face to face. And to be honest, I am feeling a little bit nervous about it. Hi.
Hello.
You must be Paul. So you were not very flattering to me on Twitter.
Okay.
You said Nelson is a hero.
A war hero.
A war hero, and I'm a joke. And
Did I say a joke
yeah,
or a
yeah,
traitor?
You know, and another one you said I was a traitor and I should be
okay.
locked up. So why do you feel so strongly about it?
It was an achievement, a massive achievement, outnumbered, and he died in that battle, and it was a great thing that he did, you know, and that's why it should stay there.
And I want to understand why you care about it that much. I mean, you clearly do care about it.
Yeah, no, because if you start taking down certain points of history, where do you stop? Where do you draw the line? OK, we take the statue down, then what, buildings and, you know, books?
But to be honest with you, when I saw your tweets, it felt quite personal. It felt like more than I think this historical figure deserves a statue. It felt like this means something to me. It felt like you were saying this means something to me.
I think it
and
means
you're
something...
attacking something that I really care about personally.
I wouldn't want to see it go. For sure, I wouldn't want to see it go.
You said I should be locked up.
If it comes to having the statue removed or you being locked up, I think I'd go with you being locked up.
When I started looking into whether we as a nation can really confront the problems of our past, I hadn't fully grasped just how much heroes like Admiral Horatio Nelson meant to people. Now I have, I want to find out what it would be like if Nelson's statue actually came down. Amazingly, there was another Nelson's column, and it was destroyed. This statue in Dublin was known as Nelson's Pillar. Built 4 years after Nelson's death, Irish Republicans increasingly saw it as a symbol of British oppression. Then, in 1966, the IRA blew it up.
They've just completely destroyed it. It's a pile of rubble. When you see it like this, it does feel like quite a brutal act to destroy a statue like that. Because it's more than a statue, it's a landmark, it's part of the city that people know. And to see it just a kind of pile of dirt and bricks, it's pretty dramatic. There's something quite sad about it, actually. I'm surprised, because I don't feel like someone who's hugely sentimental about statues, but when you see it destroyed, it does definitely have an emotional resonance.
I can see framing this debate around toppling Nelson was a distraction. What I really care about is whether we can have an honest dialogue with our past. That would mean remembering Nelson not only as a naval genius, but as a man who supported slavery. Surely we can tell more than one side of our history. I'm going to put this to Admiral Sir Jonathan Band.
Can we agree that the details of what Nelson thought and what the Navy's role was should be part of the history when it comes to the slave trade, in the context?
And it
in the
is.
proper
There's
context?
nothing hidden about it at all.
Do you think most of the visitors who come here and who kind of are interested in the history of the Navy know about that? Because I don't feel like it's that accessible.
There's nothing hidden, I can assure
Because
you.
if
But I'm not for saying, as you walk on to victory, be aware that Nelson was part of a society that accepted slavery. I mean, that is just no point doing that. But, you know, I do accept that we were part of a society that accepted slavery, and indeed we were part of a society that was very dominant in slavery.
And that belongs in the facts, even if it's not the main thing you first see when you come
Yeah,
onto
that's
the
fine,
ship.
and I'm very happy to declare that and to say it. Very much so.
I'm glad the Admiral feels that way, but I still feel that we conceal part of Nelson's story. Nelson was not just part of a society that accepted slavery, he was actively engaged in defending the slave trade. And despite what the Admiral says, I do think this history remains hidden to most. So I've decided for at least one night to make the uncomfortable truth visible. To do this, I've teamed up with a guerrilla projection team.
We could get in trouble if someone comes along.
It's time for Nelson's column to display his true colours. To see what people make of this, I've invited 3 experts that have been outspoken in this debate.
Nelson did some pretty nasty things, but he also saved this country, and he's a great working class hero. And if you say to the British people, he's not a hero, he's a slaver, and he's a bad person, pull him down, what are you going to do to the British people? You're going to divide them. We don't want that.
Can
Come
we not
together.
have both?
I only personally heard that Nelson was in favour of slavery recently, because that's how erased it is from our history. So I think it's high time that we start to really think about the complicated and quite negative history of a lot of British heroes.
This business of vilifying chunks of the past, because we don't like it, doesn't suit my interest, it's a silly thing to do. It enrages some people, it clouds the debate with anger. Just try and calm down and tell the story.
Leave Nelson where he is. Leave him alone.
I just can't understand why it's so difficult to convince our nation to tell both the good and the bad of our history. So I'm off to meet someone who's thought a lot about this. Former director of the British Museum, Neil McGregor.
We're meeting here.
Yes.
In the middle of, well, a busy roundabout, but that's not why we're here.
This is not a roundabout. This is probably the place where you can best see how Britain thinks about its military history over the last 200 years. It's the great, glorious imperial history. What is interesting, I think, is how unquestioning it is. It's just, we won, here's the monument, good for us. There's no mention of the victims on the other side, and there's no thought of who caused all this. And of course, the powerful nations all share responsibility.
Is it fair to say that Britain is a country in denial?
Yes, we tend to move pretty quickly through the awkward bits, like the slave trade, like colonial oppressions, like other injustices, and focus on the good bits, either where we won a victory or when we were doing good things. We want to use our history to reassure ourselves, to tell ourselves that we've basically been good guys.
We were on the right side of it.
We were on the right side of it. I think very much with an individual as with a community. Your memories are your identity. And we're choosing our memories very selectively at the moment. And I think that's very dangerous. That's why all this matters, because if we don't ask the right questions about what happened to us and how we behaved in the past, we're not going to get it right for the future.
There's another risk too. There are people directly affected by this history.
As our society has changed and become more diverse, and the versions of history that we know through our own family stories has changed beyond recognition, the version of history we get from our statues has stayed exactly the same. And I think it's time that that changed.
It's not just me calling for change. All over the UK, people are now demanding we are more honest about our history. Here in Oxford, protests broke out over a university statue of Cecil Rhodes, a great empire builder and donor to the university.
Hey, how are you doing?
Good, it's really good to meet you.
So yeah, here's the infamous statue.
Seems like a fitting place to meet.
Precisely, and then I'll take you to Oriel College.
Right, let's go.
2 years ago, Femi Nylander was one of a small number of black students studying at Oxford. His experiences led him to demand Rhodes must fall.
So who was Rhodes and why must he fall?
Cecil Rhodes was a British colonialist in southern Africa, and he really helped to establish the British Empire there. Cecil Rhodes called Zimbabwe Rhodesia, and the country was named after him. He was also a white supremacist who believed in the inherent superiority of white people. He justified colonialism on that basis. He put down rebellions of people trying to take their own land back very, very brutally, and murdered a lot of people in South Africa. And then the money that he made from exploiting these people, he used for things like donating to Oxford University colleges, including his own alma mater, which is Oriel College just here. So if you look up here, you can see a plaque of Cecil Rhodes.
What does it say?
It says, "Thank you to Cecil Rhodes for services to his country," meaning thank you for robbing South Africa of its wealth and donating it to this college.
What does it feel like as a student of colour, as a young black man, walking past plaques like this and statues like the one on the front of Oriel College?
I mean, it's a constant reminder of what Oxford is, right? I mean, at the end of the day, you're walking around a university which has 30 black students in a 3,000 undergraduate take. You're walking around a university which doesn't deal with its history, a university which doesn't teach African history, and walking past these slave owners and these colonialists that the university doesn't want to take down is a reminder that they just don't care. Walking past a statue of someone who said, "I prefer land to niggers," I think is oppressive.
How well informed would you say people in general are about the historical points that you're raising?
So if I said to you, divorced, beheaded, died, divorced, beheaded, survived, what comes into your head?
Henry VIII's wives.
Everyone in the UK knows that because that's what's taught to them in schools. If I said to you, dead South Africans, the rest of it, what? That's not history that's taught, and I think that people don't know this. I feel that it's not just about whitewashing. Britain needs to go further than that and say that our image of ourselves as great is deeply problematic, and we need to actually start to look into our history.
At first, the campaign seemed to be working. The university said they would consider taking down Rhodes' statue. Then suddenly, they changed their mind. A key opponent of the Rhodes Must Fall campaign, Professor Nigel Biggar, claims this was because Rhodes wasn't so guilty.
So learning more about Rhodes led them to believe that he didn't deserve to be taken down. Is that because they saw what you see in him?
I mean, the Rhodes Must Fall campaigners accuse him of being a genocidal racist, and the historical record does not bear that out.
He killed a lot of black people and was indifferent to the suffering of others, and he laid the foundations for apartheid. He forced blacks into the labour market in punitive terms under which they still live. And he left a legacy, really, of land dispossession, of institutionalised political racism in South Africa, for which he deserves to be condemned.
Did Rhodes kill lots of people? There was a war against the Ndebele in 1896. A lot of black Africans were killed. It was a war. But that doesn't make it genocidal.
So if not genocidal racist, do you accept that Rhodes was racist?
He certainly had a sense of racial superiority. I mean, there's no doubt that in the 1890s he regarded British civilization as superior to Bantu. But the point is that he didn't regard Africans as biologically inferior. I don't think it is necessarily wrong or contemptuous for people of one culture to regard people of another culture, or at least to regard another culture as, in important ways, inferior. The reason why the British tended to regard themselves as superior when they went out to various parts of Africa and India was because it seemed to them self-evident that their ways of, their technology and their science and their whatever was better. And sometimes they were wrong, and sometimes they were right.
So are you using a definition of racism that says you can believe in your own cultural superiority over black people and not be racist?
You can believe in your own culture's superiority in certain respects over another culture at a certain point in time and not be racist.
Was Rhodes a racist, yes or no?
No.
That's some definition of racism you've got there. Okay.
Oxford University had a chance to make Rhodes' legacy more sophisticated, but instead they continue to overlook and even excuse his wrongs.
I do think we have this relationship with history where we think that it's this pristine moment in the past, carved in stone, and it's untouchable as a result.
But what happens when someone tries to take history into their own hands? That's happening in Bristol, a city that's being torn apart by a history that, for centuries, was brushed under the carpet. Bristol was one of the centres of the Atlantic slave trade, and in the centre of the city stands a statue to Edward Colston, a generous philanthropist who has schools, buildings, and a concert hall named after him. The problem is, Colston was a slave trader.
I'm really excited about this. I'm about to meet someone who doesn't usually speak on camera. He's a street artist, and he's been going around Bristol, recorrecting the history himself. Are you Will?
Well.
Hello. Nice choice of pub. You've basically intervened in this whole debate about how Bristol remembers its history, haven't you?
Yeah, I was just blown away by the fact that this is kind of the birthplace of the Atlantic slave trade. I'm surprised by how many people didn't have a clue. So I made some official-looking plaques and just installed them without authorization.
So what happened to the plaques?
Council cleared it off, but I made a replacement.
You did?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Bristol, capital of the Atlantic slave trade, 1730 to 1745. Pretty powerful. So, what are you going to do with this?
Reapply it.
I'm just going to check it out, see if there's any local law enforcement.
Okay, so I can see the statue ahead. I'm just going to follow you and do what you tell me.
Oh, and then just kind of walk past over here.
I'm feeling a bit nervous, if I'm honest. I've never done anything like this before. And I've got quite mixed emotions because on the one hand, I think that what Will's doing is really responsible. I think that he's acting where others have failed us. But on the other hand, it's night, it's raining, it's cold, it's dark. It feels illicit and a bit criminal.
I'll let you stand back here and I'll just go and do some stuff.
The fact that Will had to step outside the boundaries of lawful behaviour just to put something on a statue that tells its true history.
I'm sure there'll be some pissed off people in a few days.
As I've explored the controversy surrounding British heroes, I found us Brits, more than other countries, depend on our history to feel good about ourselves. But our way of looking at history isn't the only approach. I've come to Germany to see a different model. In 1945, this country was forced to really confront its history. The monuments built by the Nazis were removed, but so were those from an earlier age, the age of the Kaisers. These statues once stood in the centre of Berlin. They celebrate the warrior kings and the great generals who unified Germany, built her empire, but who also created the cult of militarism that resulted in the First World War. They are men with blood on their hands. Their statues were taken down, but rather than being destroyed, they've been gathered together here at the Spandau Citadel, an old fortress on the outskirts of Berlin. I've come to see them with museum director Dr. Ute Erwert.
After the Second World War, everything that would show the German military should be put away.
Can I touch it?
Yes, you can touch
Really?
everything. Yeah.
Wow. Why do you let people touch them and get so close?
Because if you don't touch it, you can always still have the distance to history. But if you touch it, you can overcome that distance, and you get more, you understand more. They don't have longer power and political power, but they are now human beings.
This idea that you have of putting these statues in this space is so different from the way we treat statues in Britain. And I think it's fascinating because people often accuse someone like me, who's interested in telling a different version of the past, that I'm trying to erase it. But do you think this shows that you can take those statues down, but far from erasing the history, you're actually making it more accessible to people?
Yeah, I think you're really right, because you talk more about it. You don't forget it. You don't ignore it if it's still outside. Just you walk away and you go along and you don't see it anymore. But here, you have to go there and you have to think about it.
British and German history are very different, but I do think we can learn from the way Germany has confronted the problems of its past. I understand that removing statues isn't always warranted, but we do need to be more open about our history, even when it comes to our greatest Britons. So I'm going to examine the man constantly voted #1, Winston Churchill. His legacy recently came under fire when protesters stormed the Blighty Cafe in London.
We cannot accept the unashamed colonial and gentrifying presence of this cafe. It is our duty to fight for our freedom.
It is our duty to fight for our freedom.
We have nothing to lose by our chains.
We have nothing to lose by our chains.
It is our duty
Churchill was a racist.
It created a national debate. Churchill remains a potent figure in our national identity as the wartime Prime Minister who defended us against the Nazis. But even Churchill has a side we don't talk about. Dr. Yasmin Khan has been investigating the facts.
This is an extract from Leo Amory's diaries. Amory was the Secretary of State for India, so he's in charge of Indian policy in London. And this is the bit I really wanted to show you. He writes in his diary that Churchill has burst out with this statement: "I hate Indians.
God.
They are a beastly people with a beastly religion."
I've heard it described that Churchill had these racist views against Indian people, but I wasn't expecting it to be so blunt.
He has this kind of eugenics, 19th century informed idea of how Indians are inferior to Western people.
Churchill's attitudes towards India had consequences. In 1943, failed harvests and wartime blockades led to a famine in Bengal.
So this document,
As it was part of the British Empire, they turned to London for help, but very little came. By the end of 1943, 3 million people were dead of starvation and disease.
the question is, could they have done something from London? Could they have thought about ways of alleviating this? Could they have planned ahead? And the interesting thing here is this is Churchill's handwriting. This is the little comment from Churchill. And it's a bit enigmatic. It says, "What does this mean to you?"
So he had personally seen this, which is warning of how dire the situation in India is.
The critical thing is shipping. And what Churchill's just prioritising the whole time is the winning of the war. He's just thinking about where are ships? Where can we move men who are needed on fronts? And the lives of Bengali peasants are neither here nor there to him.
When Australia and Canada offered aid, Churchill rejected it. And Yasmin thinks she knows why.
Here we are. Winston, after a preliminary flourish on Indians breeding like rabbits.
God, that's really like eugenicist-type language.
It's also the fact that it's in the same breath as discussions about shipping and delivery of aid to the famine. So it's that kind of connection between his beliefs about Indians and the actual relief of the famine, and I think that's what's really pernicious.
So what does this mean for Churchill's legacy?
Most historians would tend to agree that hundreds of thousands could have been saved. The famine itself was beyond Churchill's control, but it's about how relief was managed. In Churchill's case, I think there's a punitive and slightly malicious element there, which means he turns his face away from sending aid when he could have done.
So this wasn't just wrong, it was nasty.
I think in Churchill's case, he was, yeah, nasty.
And there's more. Churchill described black Africans as savages in his diaries, advocated using poisonous gas against what he called uncivilized tribes in Iraq. And he ordered the bombing of German towns in 1945, not for strategic purposes, but to increase terror by killing civilians. But is any of this represented in the museums dedicated to Churchill's legacy? To find out, I've come to the Churchill War Rooms. From these underground bunkers in central London, Churchill directed the war effort and saved Britain from the Nazis. It's an incredible place, filled with information about Churchill. But there's virtually nothing about his problematic past.
What's really remarkable here is the level of detail that this museum offers into every single year of Churchill's life. And that makes the information I'm looking for all the more noticeable by its absence.
I think this other side of Churchill should be part of our national story. But to see if I can get traditionalists to agree, I'm taking my case to the so-called Honourable Member for the 18th Century, MP Jacob Rees-Mogg.
I would like us to have a more nuanced recollection to figures like Churchill, who obviously helped Britain win the war, but at the same time said and did things that I think many people would regard as reprehensible.
The question with Churchill is winning the war of such overwhelming importance that the things he said about various subjects early in his career can be overlooked. And I think in truth it is. I certainly accept that he had views about some forms of military action. He even at one point flirts with eugenics. But they're relatively trivial compared to that overwhelming victory against one of the greatest evils the world has ever seen.
Is it fair to call them trivial? Some of his contemporaries, like Lord Amory, said they feared that Churchill's racism towards Indians, for example, which was well known at the time, was actually clouding his judgment about shipping during the war.
I think he clearly gets India wrong. The difficulties during the war in shipping are very profound. There isn't an excess of shipping. It's a very difficult balancing act for him to get right. So I think that is a harsh judgment.
But does it have to be an either-or? Do you think a country needs heroes that we simply celebrate and don't talk about the more complicated issues?
Oh, I think we should certainly talk about the more complicated issues. We should certainly talk about where people have got things wrong. This is all about nuance, and that there is nobody who hasn't done something that is wrong, made a mistake.
Do you think it's possible, through something like a statue, to recognise both parts of someone's legacy, if you like, the good and the bad?
Yes, of course, you've got to remember people in their full context, but that doesn't mean that flawed people can't do great things that are worth commemorating.
Do these figures from history inform your sense of what it means to be British?
Yes, they do, because my view of our nation is that it's created by the decisions of individuals, and the big figures have had a profound effect on where our nation is. But the fundamental thing about being British is having a British passport, and that there is a great equality of people who have that passport, and whether your family, like mine's, lived in Somerset for hundreds of years, or you have gained that passport yesterday, you are as British as everybody else. And your view of being British is one you're free to hold in any way you like.
But there are now British people who have a completely legitimate right to claim Britishness, who might feel alienated by us regarding figures like Nelson or Churchill straightforwardly as heroes.
Well, I don't have a prescriptive view of what other people should think of as being British, and I don't think they should have a prescriptive view back to me of what I should be proud of being British. If you want every statue of every British hero that I believe in torn down, you're entitled to think that. And I've got to persuade a majority of the country that this is a bad idea.
Yes, because I was going to say it's your version that's up on the plinth, not mine. So,
Yeah,
it's not a level playing field.
Yes, it is. You keep going. You win election, stand for election, saying, I want all these statues pulled down. And if you win, you win.
What could we do, in your opinion, to bring that nuance to the public spaces where they stand on plinths? Do you think we should put plaques there?
Oh, I can't think of anything more boring. Who is going to stand in front of a statue reading some tiresome, long-winded footnote saying, though you might think that this fellow is a really great hero, you must bear in mind that under certain circumstances, when under pressure and subject to Clause 5 of the Prevention of Annoying People with Boring Messages on Statues Act 1832, who did something... you know,
but you talked about nuance. There's nothing nuanced about a statue. It's hero, glorious, and the end.
I think you can represent it in museums and in history courses. But I think to have a counter-statue for every hero showing the things they did wrong wouldn't serve any useful purpose.
So I'm taking Jacob up on his suggestion, and I'm going to create a museum showing how Churchill's history is more complex than the official version. I started this journey asking how we should deal with our heroes' dark pasts. I believe we need to be more open about our heroes, even the greatest national icons like Winston Churchill. So to address this balance, I'm about to open my own museum dedicated to the other side of Churchill. This is Churchill Unveiled.
I've got all of the bits and pieces I've gathered, and I'm going to put them together in an exhibition. Now, all I need to do is go and drum up some visitors. I've got 2 Churchill actors to help me. Hello, gentlemen. Are you guys here for the Churchill War Rooms? We have another Churchill exhibition happening nearby if anyone's interested. There are some facts that you won't really find here that you will find in our exhibition. It's only today, so it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. I guess now I've just got to wait and see what they make of it. It's Judgment Day.
You ask, what is our aim? I can answer in one word: victory. Victory at all costs. Victory in spite of all terror. We shall defend our island, whatever the cost may be.
We're just curious what you make of it.
I studied history and I've never learned any of this stuff.
Oh, wow.
And it's quite hard reading it.
It definitely kind of brings strong feelings of shame to the surface, which is perhaps why it's not easy to reflect upon these and perhaps why people ignore it.
We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds.
One of the people we've invited is Churchill fan Chris, the owner of the Blighty Cafe.
We shall never surrender.
I think, obviously, it's slightly one-sided. I don't see too much here about the great things he did.
Also here is Nisha. She led the anti-Churchill protest at Chris's cafe.
Churchill was a racist!
I've managed to get them to agree to speak to each other for the first time.
So Nisha, why did you do it?
We decided to protest the cafe because around that area where you do have a lot of people who are migrants from countries that used to be colonies of Britain, to celebrate Churchill without kind of also having space to criticise the parts that he played within colonialism is, a disservice to those people.
For many years, we've just been a small cafe going about its business, paying its bills, paying its taxes, with no inkling that some protesters may actually completely disagree with our business, which was a shock and which was quite painful as well, actually.
I mean, as a result of that whole incident, now, Chris, you've come here and you've read all of these different, descriptions of what Churchill did and the kind of the atrocities that he also must kind of be held accountable for.
We're all flawed. Winston's flawed. He's done some bad things, but he's done lots of great things. I still feel he's going to be a hero to me and to a lot of people. I mean, had the protesters said, look, can we come and discuss this? I would have loved to discuss I've learned some new things out of this. I didn't know all of the bad things that Winston has done, but I do think that there's a way to do it, and barging into our cafe was a harsh and unacceptable way to protest.
For one day only, I feel like we have at least been telling both sides of Churchill's story.
I think they should trust people to have the maturity to handle the good and the bad. I think everyone deserves to know the truth.
History is loaded, man.
It is. It's loaded. It's meant that people here have had conversations about history that they haven't had before. But it's only been for one day.
God bless you all, and God save the King.
I started this journey thinking about statues, about how they tell only one side of the story. Now here in Britain, as in so many countries around the world, that other side of the story, the untold side, can no longer be suppressed, no matter how uncomfortable we might find that. Few people would support their removal. That would just be seen as divisive. But we do need to find a way to be honest about our past, the good and the bad, the parts that we've tried to conceal, and the parts that we're proud of.